Hey everybody, it's Coach Pete with ActiveRecruits.com coming today from the University of Houston basketball office with my good friend Ulric Maligi, assistant coach here at the University of Houston. Coach, I want to start off and ask you, what are some things you look for when you're out on the recruiting trail hunting kids?
First of all, I just want to say thank you, Pete, for having me on.
You got it.
But, obviously you look for high character kids, kids that have the total package. I mean, we go out and try to recruit student athletes. So obviously they have to be talented enough. But we want kids that are, like we said, high character kids that can perform, well in the classroom, and that want to get a degree.
Now, if you talk about the character, when does talent overcome character, or here does it not? If you see a kid who looks like he might be a lottery pick, but he argues with his coach, things like that, but you think he might be a lottery pick, you think you can get him, is that a situation where you might look at it and say, I think we're going to try to work with this kid because he's potentially a program changer? Or do you say, a kid with low character, no matter how good he is, maybe that's just not a kid we want around here?
Well, for us, it's a great question. I think we want to just try to get guys who can actually play at the next level. Anytime you can get lottery picks, I mean, you want to try to capitalize on that. But I think you have to draw the line as for your program. I think you got to be careful taking certain kids. I mean, certain kids have so much baggage that they can be a hindrance to your program. So you just got to, whatever your values are, and every coach is different. But for us, no one's perfect. Kids, we like coaching because we get an opportunity to make impressions on these kids' lives, change their lives, build lasting relationships with them, and try to, not only help them be a better basketball player, but to be a better person, better human being, teach them how to be a man. So, but some kids you can help. They just come from different, type of backgrounds, that they haven't been exposed to certain things. So we embark on those opportunities to make an impression on some kids' lives. Other kids we try to stay away from just because we've done our homework, we've done our research. We know a lot of coaches, different people that have had dealings with those people. So we try to stay away from it.
So if it's a kid that maybe has some issues, maybe some baggage, but you talk to the kid's high school coach and he says, hey, look, I know he's got baggage, but he's got a good heart. I believe in him. I think that I've had some problems with him, but I think that his heart is in the right place. If it's a situation like that and he's good enough, because you're right. I mean, when I worked at a small private school with mostly affluent kids, I wondered, was I making any difference at all? Were those kids going to be better off or worse off if they'd never met Coach Pete? And, that was a question I asked myself. Then when I was at Skyline or when I was at Yates, I knew I was having a tangible, direct, and immediate impact. You're right. That's part of what makes coaching fun. You don't always want the finished product. Sometimes you want the kid who needs development, not just athletically, but socially, character-wise. So you talked about the research y'all do. Just kind of walk me through that process a little bit. If it's a kid you love as a player, but then character-wise off the court, he's not a hardened criminal, he's not a felon, but there's some issues there. How do you walk through that as a staff? I
think baggage, Pete, is just one of those things that every individual has their own opinion as to what their baggage limit or what is viewed as baggage, by every individual coach. I just think that there are some kids that if they have serious problems, we don't actually want to take a kid with quote unquote baggage. But I mean, it's certain kids, have got in trouble in the past, minor trouble, or kids are going to be kids. But we do our due diligence to go watch these kids play at the high schools, watch them practice, watch them interact with their peers, and then we call teachers, counselors, high school coaches, people in the community that we trust, and then just try to make our own assumption. You make our own educated guess, and you get a gut feeling. I mean, I think we're really good at filling out people, getting having an understanding as to where they come from, getting an opportunity to meet their parents and the people that influence. I think that's all important.
Now, let me ask you this, Coach, because he's been hustling for a long time. I mean, you played at Howard.
I was actually student assistant.
Student assistant at Howard, and people have known you in the business for way before you got a chance to coach in Division I, you were someone who was known because you're a people person and you were out there working. So I know sometimes you see kids on the recruiting trail that you go, man, I really like that kid. Not quite for U of H, because at U of H, you know, we're trying to be back like Phi Slama Jam. You know, we're trying to crush Memphis and let them know that U of H is the king of Conference USA. So, you know, we need pros here. You know, we need pros. But there are going to be some kids you see that you like who probably aren't pros, but you like them. Do you then call friends of yours at other schools, smaller schools, and say, hey, I saw this kid, you ought to go look at him?
Well, you know, the thing is, Pete, you know, you mentioned we need pros. We need pros, but we got to have good people too. You know, but there are situations, there are times that I can remember where I see a kid, and, you know, like for instance this summer, it was a couple kids that I felt would be really good players at certain levels, and I called buddies of mine in those leagues and say, hey, I think this kid's going to be a great fit for you guys' program, the way you guys play, whatever the case may be. I've done that, you know, at every school that I've been, even if it was calling a school that I thought was, you know, when I worked, you know, maybe at the Southland level, I may call a buddy in the Big 12 and say, hey man, you know, I know it's no chance. We have no chance on this kid, but I don't know. I don't think, you know, a lot of people know about this guy. He's really, really good, you know. So I mean, I think it happens both ways, and I get calls all the time from buddies in the business, D2 buddies, JUCO buddies, you know, that say, hey, you know, even summer league coaches that say, hey, I know you guys are looking for a point guard. I really, really like this kid. You know, you have your network of coaches that you've been knowing for a time, that you trust, and you feel, you know, can really evaluate and just understand kind of what you're looking for. You know, yeah.
And then, how important is character in that setting, where, let's say you're at a D2 school, Division I coaches can't be out. Mm-hmm. You see a kid, you know you're not going to get him. You know, you might get him on the rebound if it doesn't work out, but you know you're not going to get a kid at that level out of high school if you're at a D2 school, say for example. But you want to call some buddies in D1 to help the kid. How important are the little things like character, like effort, like coachability, in terms of you being motivated to go try to help that kid? You're not trying to help yourself and your school, you're trying to help the kid and maybe help a friend of yours get a good player. How important is the character and the effort and the coachability in that setting?
The same things that I value, Coach, are the same things that I would value in a kid that I would recommend. I think, you know, in our profession, if you look at the really, really good teams, the teams that are successful, the teams that win championships, you know, in such a short career, I've been blessed to be a part of 3 championship teams. And we were never the most talented team in the league. We had I thought our team was the most high character. We had guys that bought into the system, who worked really, really hard, and you know, they bought into what we were selling. They took care of the business off the court, and so anytime I'm looking at another kid and I say, hey, you know, this guy may not quite be good enough for us, but man, I think he'd be really good here. You know, I just think it's important that he has those same, you know, morals. I see the same morals and values in that kid.
Character's big regardless. I mean, something that kids get advice on that they don't always hear is you never know who's in the gym. You never know. There could be, it might be a non-live period for Division I, but if there's a Division II school, or if there's a scout in the gym who has relationships with Division I coaches, and you're arguing with the referee or you're strangling your coach, that matters. You know, you absolutely never know. One set of eyes in the gym might have 1,000 people following them on Twitter. Well, now that makes 2,000 sets of eyes in the gym. So, you know, you really want to be careful with that you never know who's watching. So make sure you're on your best behavior and don't argue with the referees. You just look so foolish. Raise your hand if you ever changed a referee's mind on a call. Well, you didn't ever do that. So why would you argue with them in the first place? Not to mention the fact it can literally hurt you and potentially cost you scholarships. And again, if your talent is here, okay, then you might get some scholarship offers anyway. But if you're a borderline kid, the tie goes to the good kid. If a school's looking at 2 kids, the talent's about the same, the tie goes to the good kid. Now, Coach, I also wanted to ask you, because you've been around a while. I mean, you played for Arlington Bowie, correct?
Correct.
Who was the coach there at that time?
Alan Grass.
Still Coach Grass.
Coach Grass,
okay.
Yeah.
What was it like for you getting recruited out of high school? I mean, you played high school ball. You probably wanted to play. Division I. You know, did you have some schools coming to recruit you? Did you look at lower levels, or did you have the dream to be a college coach? You felt you wanted to be in D1 no matter what?
Well, for me, I think my situation was a little different. Since the age of 15, I've always known I wanted to be a college coach. And I was fortunate enough to be with an AAU program at the age of 18, my senior year in high school. So I went in, I never really had aspirations to play at that level. I wasn't the most talented basketball player in high school. You know, I was solid, but I knew I wasn't going to be a big-time Division I player. So I looked at it as an opportunity to go in, be a student assistant at Howard University, and get an opportunity to do some film exchange. And Coach Frankie Allen was the head coach at the time. He gave me an unbelievable opportunity. Worked with some really, really good people there. It was an unbelievable experience for 4 years. I got a chance to, do a lot of beneficial things.
You know, we talk about doing your work early in the recruiting process. That's something that we preach very hard to the kids we work with. But I think it's important to notice that lesson's applicable to life. We used to teach kids with a nonprofit I help with that you can't live your dream unless you have a dream, and that you should begin with the end in mind. Well, what a great example. You knew you wanted to be a college coach, but you didn't just wish for it. It wasn't a wish, a dream that you said maybe one day it'll happen. It was something you wanted, and you worked your butt off, and you did your work early, and you did some stuff in college, like you probably swept a floor or two. You know, you probably did the film exchange. You know, the grunt work that a lot of people say, well, I want to be a college coach. You know, they just see Krzyzewski on the sidelines making $2 million. They have no idea the work that went into him getting there. And so I think that's important to realize that the do your work early, can't live your dream unless you have a dream, begin with the end in mind. These are things that aren't just applicable to the recruiting process, they're applicable to life. I mean, you're living your dream right now. In my opinion, had you not worked your tail off and started at 15 and done your work early, I'm not sure you'd be sitting here right now. You might have made it there eventually anyway, because you're talented and because you work hard, but without having that idea and a plan for how to get there ahead of time, I think it would have been a harder road. So I want to congratulate you on that. And I think it's something that young kids out there can learn from, not just with the recruiting process, period. And then the other thing I wanted to find out, Coach, is I know you've seen a lot of parents and kids make bad decisions. I know you've seen a lot of parents and kids make mistakes. What are some of those bad decisions? What are some of those mistakes? Two-part question. What are bad decisions and mistakes that parents and kids could avoid, should avoid? And then the second part of that question is, what can kids and parents do out there to help themselves with the recruiting process?
I think the first part of the question, the mistakes that some parents make a lot, you got to be careful who you listen to, who you trust, and you got to do your own homework, your own research. On universities, on coaching staffs, you got to have concrete facts. I think now it's just so many people that think they have an opinion on how the recruiting process works, but a lot of people out there have, unfortunately, ulterior motives. So it's really difficult for some parents who are kind of naive to the process to kind of filter through those things. But I think you have to get with coaches, high school coaches, summer league coaches, who you really, really trust. And it has to be, your circle has to be really close. With the parents, with that high school coach, that summer league coach that you really trust, and you guys sit down and you guys try to make an educated decision.
I tell you, it's the difficult thing is that oftentimes money changes hands. Okay, so let's say that I am working with a kid every day with the cones and the tennis balls, and I'm a skill development guru. Mm-hmm. Okay, so a kid and his family might be paying me $1,000 a month. Well, after 6 months, and that they ask me, what level is my son? Mm-hmm. Well, I almost have to say Division I, because if I don't, they might ask the question, why have I been paying you $1,000 a month? And you're now saying that my son's a D3 player. Same thing in the AAU circuit. Let's say you're paying $6,500 to join a team, mm-hmm. and you ask that coach, what level is my son? Well, that coach knows that if he says D3, he's probably not going to get that check. Mm-hmm. So there's a motive there. So understand that when money's changing hands, and I tell every client I have that it's my job to get a college to look, only your son can get to college to like. So I don't really get into that game of I think you're D1, D2, D3. But believe me, there are a lot of people out there who do what I do for a living. If you ask them before you write a check, and there's a check on the table that might get passed, what level's my son? They're going to tell you D1. You know, so I think one handy trick is if there's a high school, because your high school coach oftentimes can't tell you the truth either. If he tells you the truth and hurts your feelings, you might transfer. If he tells you the truth and hurts your feelings, you and your parents might go try to get his job. So I think one little helpful trick of the trade is you should, anytime a college coach talks to you and they eventually decide that they're not going to recruit you, well, now that college coach no longer has an agenda. So that's a good person to call and ask, hey, legit coach, what level should I be at? And I think that coaches, high school coaches in your district, especially if they've had kids go play college recently, you should go ask them, you know, coach, what do you think? It's just very hard to get impartial, unbiased advice. And yet that's part of the whole secrets. You know, you have to, if you can get realistic, accurate information about yourself, well, that's half the battle right there. So I wouldn't necessarily go to my own high school coach or my own AAU coach or my own workout coach or my own college placement service to ask. Because there can be agendas involved. You know what I'm saying?
I understand, you know, your point of view. I think every point of view is different. Though, for me, when I was a summer league coach, we actually sat down with our parents. We informed them of the process. We were very realistic. We're gauging where some kids were and trying to put them in best situations where they can come in and play. And I think that's probably the number one mistake, is that everybody wants to go to the biggest school that's recruiting them, as opposed to going where they can really be an impact. And those coaches really have invested their time in you. One of the things that we like to tell our recruits and tell our players all the time, the way they recruit you is the way they're going to treat you when you get on campus. And I really believe that. I think if you have coaches that really invest a lot of time in you, spend a lot of time getting to know you first as a person, and then understanding your abilities as a player, I think if you put yourself in situations like that, I think you set yourself up to be really successful.
I think that's so true. If they recruit you as an afterthought, how do you think they're going to treat you? You know, it's kind of self-evident, the answer to that question. And to back up, I'm not saying there's not any high school coaches or AAU coaches or workout guys or consultants that are going to tell you the honest, upfront, whole truth. I'm just saying that when money's changing hands, that's a little bit difficult. Like the Mustangs, for example, not many kids are paying y'all. Y'all were a pretty elite, pretty big time program.
Well, we had quite a few kids that actually paid for tournaments. We had one team that was totally sponsored, which was our 1700 team, our elite team. The other kids that we had in the program, I mean, they paid their entry fees. They came to practice, paid whatever registration fees we had for them. And so, but I just think it all goes back to just having good people involved in the process, people that are trustworthy, and parents have to go out and find those individuals. They're bad individuals at every level in this business. I hate when people try to classify a group of coaches or a group of people and say, hey, I hate dealing with these guys. I just think you got to deal with good people that's going to tell you the truth, people that have your best interests at heart. Because there are a lot of really, really good high school coaches who are very truthful, who have coached a lot of Division I players who have an excellent opinion and can really gauge what level their kids are, where they can be really successful.
I agree, if it sounded like I was painting everybody with the same brush, didn't mean for it to sound like that. I do think, though, that money changing hands is a contributory factor sometimes toward an opinion being offered that is not an unbiased opinion.
No, I totally agree.
But no, you're right. I shouldn't have painted, because that does happen. That you have an AAU background. I've coached summer ball before, and sometimes people paint every AAU coach with a brush of unethical behavior, which is wrong. There are plenty of AAU coaches out there who are doing the right thing, all day, every day, and doing whatever they can to help their kids. Now, what about what can kids do to help themselves? Okay, say you're in a situation where your recruiting interest isn't going the way you want it to. What are some things you can do to help yourself get noticed? Put your name out there.
The recruiting isn't going the way you want as far as
interest,
the interest
and options and opportunities. You're one of those classic under the radar kids. How can you help you?
You know, I think the way it's set up now, I personally think that if you put yourself in a situation where you play really well during the high school year, it's so many people who, you know, scouting services nowadays, somebody's going to find you. If you're playing really well, I think you just got to focus on you, improving your skills, having your grades as high as possible, playing in front of the right people. You know, playing in front of the right. What do I mean by that? You know, playing, you know, at these AAU tournaments or summer league tournaments, or, you know, if your high school is fortunate enough to play in some of these bigger tournaments. You know, some schools, you know, play maybe, you know, out in the middle of nowhere and that kind of thing. But if you can go from a situation like that, maybe come to a city like Houston or Dallas or, you know, in Austin, where it's a little more exposure to scout services, I think that always is beneficial.
So the most important thing to you, as far as a kid helping himself, is for him to work his butt off.
No question.
He needs to get his skills right, get in shape, hit the weight room.
I think nowadays, man, you know, are there still sleepers? No question. But there's just so many scouting services nowadays that if you can really, really play, and you're a really good student, you know, 9 times out of 10, not every time, but 9 times out of 10, somebody out there is talking about you and talking about you to college coaches. You know, I thought it was a few guys we signed this year who I felt were under the radar that a lot of people didn't know about. But again, somebody told us about it.
Right.
You know, we had an opportunity to go out and investigate those situations, and fortunately for us, we were able to get those guys. So, you know, I just think that it's one of those things where I think the cream always rises to the top. You know, maybe I'm just naive in my thoughts, but I really believe.
When you say always, what you said just a second ago was 90%. It's probably a little higher than 90%. But if you look at like, to me, the difference between a great Division III guard and a mediocre low major Division I guard is that there's practically no difference, except for one kid played well in the right gym on the right day. I think that a lot of people out there don't realize how good Division III basketball is, and I think that it goes all the way down. I think that the all-conference kids in Conference USA probably could have played in the BCS or whatever. You know, I think the all-conference Southland players probably could have played in a slightly higher league, the MAC or the West Coast, or, you know, the SoCon or whatever level is just slightly ahead. So I do still think, even though cream rises to the top, and in today's environment with the internet and all the scouting services, it's much harder to get missed. The Willis Reed doesn't go to Grambling anymore. You know, it is different. But I certainly feel like there are kids to this day who get missed, just a lot fewer of them. I mean, you're right. As a general rule,
you're saying for opportunities. I think. You know, I think it's one of those things where you have some kids that get, you know, recruited and, you know, really, really hard, and they have all these options, but, you know, their parents and their circle decide that, hey, we're going to go to a mid-major plus situation, or we're going to go to a low major school instead of going to a mid-major where we may not play as much. So, you know, I think you look at some of those all-conference rosters, some of those guys got overlooked, and then some of those guys were just guys that, you know, wanted to go there because they felt like they could be an all-conference guy, which I think is fantastic.
Or they were late bloomers, late developers, you know. But see, I agree with you. We can't mention specific names by NCAA rule because some school hasn't started yet. But I agree. You got a couple kids coming who, to me, the perceived higher level made a mistake on. So even in today's environment, you know, it certainly is possible to be missed.
Well, and we signed, you know, every kid that we signed this year had offers from BCS leagues, and we were fortunate to, like I said, to sign. But we had a great, unbelievable group of 8 guys coming in that I feel like those guys could all play at a BCS school somewhere, and so we're fortunate to have them. So we just gotta, you know, try to mold these guys.
Now, what are your thoughts on showcases, elite camps, you know, the stuff like that like for example, Jim Hicks does with Spring Icebreaker an unsigned senior event. That's good. I mean, there are quite a few kids get offers and opportunities and scholarships, or at least roster spots coming out of there. So there are, some things that kids can do that don't like their options to really help their stock. What are your thoughts on showcases, elite camps, recruiting websites like berecruited.com, things like that?
I mean, I think, the more exposure that you can get for a recruit, I think is good. I think anything that's positive, that's going to you have a chance to showcase your skills, and you have scout services that are going to be able to write about your abilities and gauge kind of what level you are. I think that's always a positive. For us, I mean, we don't get. I think those scouting services are great and they do fantastic jobs. I mean, we subscribe to a number of, but we kind of we like to come up with our own rankings. We have our own Cougar rankings, and so I think it's pretty cool. There are some college coaches who strictly go off rankings.
That's true.
And it frustrates me. But it happens. And I think when that happens, and now you have kids that they end up going to bad situations. But we try to get a good gauge. We could care less if the kid was not ranked in the top 100 in the country. If he's the right player for us, and we feel like he's a high-level guy. There have been guys, and Coach Brooks and I, we talk about all the time, that played right here at University of Houston who were on nobody's top 100 list, and then they end up having great NBA careers. So even if you look at the NBA draft, I mean, they have guys, that were the lower half of the top 100. Derek Williams, who was the second pick in the draft. He was I think Rivals had him at 72 in the country. Coming out, he was like the 27th best power forward overall.
Right.
And he didn't have a bad college career. So I think, anytime I think you can play in front of scout services or showcases, I think those are always
so
good.
To sum it up, in today's day and age, the cream does usually rise to the top. Most of the kids who don't have Division I offers don't have them because they're not good enough. As basketball players, not as people, as basketball players. But you do still have, and the rankings matter, but you have quite a few kids who aren't ranked, who can still play a little bit. So just because you don't have the options you like, you should cast a wide net, you should be realistic. At the same point in time, though, you shouldn't let people kill your dreams, because kids do still get missed, and there are still kids every year in Texas who have really no solid Division I offers in the fall, but wind up signing Division I in the spring. So even though in general everything we've talked about here is applicable, it is important to understand that there are exceptions to the rule, and you shouldn't let anybody out there kill your dream. You should continue to pursue the dream aggressively. But I just add the caveat of pursue it realistically also. No reason on earth why you can't, as you're chasing the D1 dream, why you can't also make sure you don't miss application deadlines to D3 schools. If that makes any sense. And then same thing with guys who don't return D2 and D3 coaches' telephone calls. That just doesn't make any sense. The number one rule in college recruiting is Recruiting 101 on the very first page. It says, leave no stone unturned and follow up on every lead. And the same rule could be put to you if you're one of the under-the-radar kids. Do not leave any stones unturned. Follow up on every lead until you have your dream situation materialize. You're better off assuming it's not going to, and working your butt off on a backup plan and a backup to the backup plan. That's my advice. To make sure you cast a wide net. Coach, you got any other final thoughts? I kept you a little. Go ahead.
No, final thoughts. I mean, just not final thoughts, but just piggybacking off your last thought. I think. You're definitely telling these recruits correctly on these potential prospects. I think you have to return every phone call. And nothing frustrates a college coach more than him calling a prospect, taking time to call a prospect, and then them not returning this call. When I was a summer league coach, we used to always tell our kids, hey, if any coach calls you, you call them back. They email you, you email them back. I just think that's just the right thing to do. But you can't have these list of schools these are the schools I want to go to, but these schools haven't contacted you. So we've got to be realistic and see, okay, these are schools that have called. These are schools that we're interested in them because they're interested in us.
Absolutely.
You know, and so I think that's the way that you approach it. You always be truthful with coaches and just kind of keep them. You know, you can't tell coaches everything, but you kind of as you begin to possibly move out of the range of some coaches or some of the schools, programs, what have you. Then you communicate those things, you thank the coaches, and you try to handle things the right way because you just never know who can help you.
Oh, you never know. If you think about it like this, I bet there were some kids who, when you were at Stephen F., you were calling them, and they were like, "Nah, I'm better than the South," and they weren't really calling you. Then all of a sudden you were here, and now they're probably calling you, saying, "Ooh, Coach, I like Conference USA." Now, to me, and again, there's a matrix. The better the kid is, the more he gets away with. In terms of as you're pursuing kids, that's just the reality of most places. I'm glad to hear you say that y'all are really putting a high value on character. But there's most schools, if you're really good enough and they think you're a major difference maker, you can argue with the referee and not be very coachable and probably be okay. But the kids who maybe disrespected you and Stephen F. Austin, and now they're calling you now that you're in Conference USA and a program with big time tradition. And the thought might cross your mind, it's not spite, it's not vengeance, it's just now this is an irresponsible, arrogant kid. If he didn't call me back at Stephen F., he's not a very responsible kid. He probably has an inflated opinion of himself. Is that the kind of person that you want in your program? So, like you said, you never know. You don't know who's in the gym.
That never happened to me coming from Stephen F. to Houston. That didn't happen. But I have heard those situations happen just with colleagues in the business. So I think, again, it's just you always want to communicate well, be upfront. If you're not interested, tell the coach, hey, I'm not interested in your program for whatever reasons. So he can move on, and he won't be bothering. He won't bother you and your family.
Well, college coaches always say the second best answer they can get is no.
Yeah.
But at the same point in time, like we just discussed a minute ago, if you don't really have any other options, don't close doors.
No question.
Don't say no to anybody. And then really that's about it on my end as far as questions I wanted to get out there. You got any other final thoughts to
I
add?
just want to say thank you again for having me on. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you, brother.
Okay.
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, and again, it's Coach Pete with AcademicRecruits.com. You can email me at CoachPete@AcademicRecruits.com. Happy to answer any questions you have. And again, we appreciate Coach's time, and we'll be back at you tomorrow.